Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Orbital Station Artemis, her dark eyes fixed on the endless expanse of stars beyond Earth's atmosphere. Something felt wrong. The usual stream of alien vessels that dotted Earth's orbital lanes had dwindled to nothing over the past week. The bustling trade routes that had connected humanity to the greater galactic community for the past 30 years had gone silent. "Commander, you need to see this." Lieutenant David Park's voice carried an edge of urgency that made Chen turn immediately from the viewport. The young officer's normally composed features were tight with concern as he held up his datapad. "Another failed transmission?" Chen asked, already knowing the answer. They'd been experiencing communication disruptions with their alien allies for days now, but this felt different. "Not just failed, Commander. Every single channel to every known civilization. They're all dead. Not jammed, not interrupted. It's as if the receivers on the other end simply ceased to exist." Chen took the pad, scrolling through the data with growing unease. Earth had maintained diplomatic relations with over 20 spacefaring civilizations, from the crystalline Arxer to the enigmatic Voidborn. Now, in the span of a week, every single one had gone dark. "Pull up the long-range scans," she ordered, moving to the command center's main display. "Show me traffic patterns from the past month." The holographic display sprang to life, showing the usual flowing streams of interstellar traffic. Until 7 days ago, the streams didn't gradually fade or show signs of disruption. They simply stopped, as if someone had drawn a line in space and time. "It's too clean," Chen muttered, more to herself than to her officers. "This isn't a natural phenomenon or a technical malfunction. Someone wanted us cut off." The implications were staggering. Earth had risen quickly in the galactic community, perhaps too quickly for some of the older civilizations' comfort. Humanity's adaptability and innovation had earned them both admiration and wariness from their alien neighbors. But to be completely isolated. "Ma'am," called out Senior Analyst Rivera from her station, "I'm detecting unusual energy readings at the edge of the solar system. They're faint, but they form a pattern, like a net or a web." Chen's blood ran cold. "They've contained us," she realized. "Whoever they are, they've put our entire solar system under quarantine." The command center fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Earth's population had grown dependent on galactic trade for everything from advanced medical technologies to faster-than-light travel components. Being cut off wouldn't just hurt their economy. It could potentially devastate their civilization. But as Chen looked around at her crew, she didn't see defeat in their eyes. She saw determination, the same fierce resolve that had carried humanity from their first hesitant steps into space to becoming a respected member of the galactic community in just a few generations. "Send word to Earth Defense Command," she ordered, her voice steady and clear. "Tell them we need to implement Protocol Omega immediately. If someone thinks they can simply lock humanity away and forget about us, they're about to learn a harsh lesson." Protocol Omega was something Chen had helped design, but hoped never to use. A complete reorganization of Earth's defense and industrial capacity for long-term isolation. It would be painful, requiring sacrifices from everyone, but humanity had survived worse. As emergency alerts began flashing across screens and the station's activity increased to fever pitch, Chen returned to the viewport. The stars looked different now, colder somehow, but they hadn't become any less beautiful, any less inviting. "You wanted to cage us," she whispered to the distant lights. "You should have remembered. Humanity was born in a cage called Earth, and we broke free of that one too." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. Every ship was recalled, every outpost fortified. Earth's governments united with unprecedented speed, recognizing the existential threat they faced. The panic that Chen had feared might tear society apart instead seemed to be bringing people together. Deep in the command center, Chen reviewed the latest reports. Their stockpiles of critical resources would last 6 months, maybe 8 with strict rationing. That had to be enough time to figure out who had done this to them, and why. "Commander," Lieutenant Park called out, "We're picking up something strange. Well, you should see this yourself." Chen moved to his station, watching as a signal pattern played across his screen. It was weak, barely detectable, but it was there. A repeating sequence of pulses coming from somewhere beyond the barrier that now enclosed their solar system. "It's not like any communication protocol I've ever seen," Park said, "but it's definitely artificial. And look at the timing of the pulses. They're prime numbers. Someone's trying to get our attention." Chen leaned closer, studying the pattern. "Can you trace it?" "Not precisely, but it's coming from the direction of the Carina Nebula. That's supposed to be uninhabited space." "Supposed to be," Chen repeated thoughtfully. "What if we're not the first civilization to be quarantined like this? What if others came before us?" The idea sent ripples of excitement through the command center. If there were others out there, others who had faced this same situation, perhaps they weren't as alone as their mysterious enemies wanted them to be. "Begin analyzing that signal," Chen ordered. "Every detail, every variation, and prepare a response using the same pattern. If someone's reaching out to us, we're going to answer." As she watched her crew spring into action with renewed purpose, Chen felt a smile touch her lips for the first time in days. Whoever had orchestrated this isolation had made a crucial mistake. They hadn't crushed humanity's spirit. They had given it a mystery to solve, a challenge to overcome. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was turning obstacles into opportunities. 3 weeks after Earth's isolation began, Commander Chen found herself aboard the research vessel Magellan, pushing the boundaries of their solar prison. The mysterious signal from the Carina Nebula had grown stronger, carrying with it fragments of data that hinted at an unsettling truth. "The decryption is complete," Dr. Maya Patil announced, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The scientist's eyes were rimmed with dark circles, evidence of countless sleepless nights spent analyzing the signal. "You're going to want to see this, Commander." The command deck of the Magellan fell silent as ancient star charts materialized in the air before them. They showed familiar sectors of space, but with unfamiliar names and boundaries. Most disturbing were the red zones scattered throughout the galaxy, dozens of them, each containing a solar system much like Earth's. "These are quarantine zones," Dr. Patil explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some of them are centuries old. We're not the first, Commander. We're just the latest in a long line of civilizations that have been contained." Chen studied the charts, her mind racing. Any pattern to which civilizations were targeted? Yes, actually. Patel highlighted several systems with a gesture. Every quarantine civilization showed rapid technological advancement, particularly in fields related to consciousness transfer and artificial intelligence. The data suggests there's some kind of threshold. Once a species gets too close to a particular technological breakthrough, they're isolated. Lieutenant Park, who had insisted on joining the mission, leaned forward. "But why not just destroy us? Why go through the trouble of containment?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Marcus Wong, the ship's xenorchaeologist, had been quietly studying the transmitted data in a corner. "Because we're an experiment," he said, looking up from his work. "All of us. Every quarantine civilization. We're test subjects." Chen felt her jaw tighten. "Explain." Wong projected his own findings alongside the star charts. "These quarantine zones, they're not just prisons, they're observation chambers. The barrier around our solar system isn't just keeping us in. It's monitoring everything we do. How we react to isolation, how we adapt, how we evolve." "The signal," Patil added, "it's coming from one of the oldest quarantine zones. Whoever sent it has been trapped for over 300 years. But they've learned to communicate through the barriers, found ways to reach out to other contained species." The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just facing isolation. They were unwitting participants in some vast, galaxy-spanning experiment. But who were the experimenters? And what were they trying to learn? A sudden alert from the ship's sensors interrupted Chen's thoughts. Unknown energy signature detected, the AI announced. Similar to barrier composition, but highly concentrated. Distance, 300,000 kilometers and closing. Show me, Chen ordered. The main display shifted to reveal a ripple in space, like heat waves over hot pavement, but impossibly large and moving with purpose. It's some kind of probe, Park reported, scanning the readings. I think it's part of the containment system. It must have detected our attempts to communicate outside the barrier. Chen made a split-second decision. Dr. Patel, can you send a response to our friends in Karina? Tell them we received their message and we understand. Dr. Wong, I want everything you've learned about the barrier's composition. Lieutenant Park, prepare for emergency maneuvers. The probe was getting closer, its energy signature growing stronger. Whatever it was, it clearly wasn't designed for friendly contact. Commander, Park called out, his voice tense. The probe is emitting some kind of signal. It's trying to interface with our systems. Chen watched as the ship's displays flickered, ancient symbols and patterns flashing across the screens. But instead of trying to fight the intrusion, she smiled. Let it in. Commander. Park looked at her in shock. They've been watching us, studying us, Chen explained. But that means we can study them too. Dr. Patel, are you recording this? Every byte. The scientist confirmed, her fingers flying over her console. This is incredible. The probe's programming language, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. But there are patterns, Commander. We can learn from this. The probe's attempt to disable their systems failed, encountering encryption protocols that humanity had developed during their brief but educational contact with other species. As it withdrew, Chen could have sworn she felt something like surprise emanating from the artificial construct. They underestimate us, she said softly. They think isolation will weaken us, make us easier to control. They don't understand that humanity thrives under pressure. The probe retreated as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a wealth of data for Earth scientists to analyze. But it had also left something else. Confirmation that they were being watched, and that their watchers weren't as infallible as they might wish to appear. Send all of this back to Earth, Chen ordered. Every scrap of data, every theory, everything we've learned about the quarantine zones. And send a message to Defense Command. Tell them we're not just fighting for our freedom anymore. We're fighting for every species that's ever been caged like this. As the Magellan turned back toward Earth, Chen felt a fierce pride in her crew, in humanity's resilience. Their mysterious observers had made a critical error in judgment. They thought they were containing a potential threat, but what they had really done was give humanity exactly what it needed to grow stronger. A worthy challenge and a noble cause. They want to study us. Chen murmured, watching the probe's energy signature fade into the distance. Let's give them something worth studying. 2 months into Earth's isolation, humanity had transformed itself in ways that would have seemed impossible before the quarantine. The loss of galactic trade had forced innovation at an unprecedented pace, and nowhere was this more evident than at the newly established Breakthrough Institute in Antarctica. Commander Chen walked through the facility's main research bay, marveling at the projects surrounding her. Where most species might have crumbled under the pressure of isolation, humans had taken their limitations and turned them into opportunities. The quantum mechanics team made another breakthrough last night, Dr. Patel reported, falling into step beside Chen. The scientist looked exhausted but excited, her eyes bright with discovery. We've managed to replicate some of the barrier's basic properties in laboratory conditions. It's not much, but it's a start. Show me, Chen said, following Patel to a sealed chamber where a shimmer in the air, barely visible, separated 2 sections of the room. We're calling it the mirror protocol, Patel explained, pressing her hand against the barrier. It rippled like water but held firm. It's based on what we learned from that probe. The aliens didn't just give us a cage. They gave us the blueprints to build our own. Before Chen could respond, an alert sounded through the facility. Commander Chen to Mission Control. the AI announced. Priority 1 transmission from the Kuiper Belt expedition. Chen exchanged glances with Paddle before hurrying to the control room. The Kuiper Belt mission had been a desperate gamble, sending ships to the very edge of their solar prison to search for anything that might help them understand their situation better. The main screen showed Captain James Rodriguez of the survey ship Hawking, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. "Commander, we found something out here. Something old. Really old." The camera panned to show what looked like a metallic sphere, approximately 20 meters in diameter, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. It hung suspended in space, untouched by the ice and debris that surrounded it. "Initial scan suggested predates human civilization," Rodriguez continued. "But here's the weird part. It's giving off energy signatures identical to the containment barrier. This thing. It's made by the same people who locked us in here." Chen felt her pulse quicken. "Any sign it's dangerous?" "No active weapon systems that we can detect. But Commander, it's responding to us. When we brought the Hawking closer, it started transmitting data. Dr. Wong is analyzing it now." The xenoarchaeologist's face appeared on a secondary screen, his eyes wide with excitement. "Commander, this is incredible. The sphere appears to be some kind of library or archive. It's filled with technical data, historical records, everything we could want to know about our captors. And they just left it out here." Chen's eyes narrowed. "That seems convenient." "Not exactly," Wong explained. "Based on the data we've decoded so far, this archive wasn't meant for us to find. It belongs to something called the Predecessor Initiative, apparently a group that split from the main faction of our captors thousands of years ago. They didn't agree with the policy of containing developing civilizations." Chen absorbed this information, her mind racing with possibilities. "So we have allies out there." "Had allies," Wong corrected grimly. "The record suggests the initiative was eventually hunted down and destroyed, but not before they left these archives scattered throughout quarantine zones, hoping that eventually someone would find them and use the knowledge to break free." "Send everything back to the Institute," Chen ordered. "And Captain Rodriguez, get that sphere somewhere safe. If this is what I think it is, we just found our way out of this cage." Over the next several days, the archive yielded its secrets. The predecessors had documented everything. The true nature of the containment barriers, the technology behind them, and most importantly, their weaknesses. But they had also left warnings. "The barriers aren't just walls," Dr. Paddle explained during an emergency briefing. "They're designed to suppress technological development in specific areas, particularly those related to consciousness transfer and artificial intelligence. The more we push against those limitations, the stronger the suppression becomes." "So we find another way," Chen said firmly. "We think outside their box. What else did we learn from the archive?" Wong stepped forward, projecting a complex diagram. "The predecessors believed that consciousness itself was the key. Not artificial intelligence or digital transfer, but the natural evolution of organic consciousness. They theorized that if a species could achieve a specific state of collective awareness, they could essentially phase through the barriers. Like quantum tunneling on a massive scale," Paddle added, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "We wouldn't need to break the barrier if we could simply transcend it." Chen looked around the room at Earth's brightest minds, seeing the same determination reflected in every face. "How long to develop a practical application of this theory?" "Using conventional methods." "Years, maybe decades," Patil admitted. "But combining this with our mirror protocol research, we might have something workable in months. We'd need to network human consciousness in a way that's never been done before, but the theoretical framework is sound." "Do it," Chen ordered, "but keep it quiet. If the archive is right about one thing, it's that we're being watched. Let them think we're still fumbling in the dark. Let them think their containment is working." As the scientists rushed to begin their work, Chen stood at the window, looking up at the stars that had become both prison and promise. The predecessors had given them a chance, But it would be human ingenuity that would turn that chance into freedom. Somewhere out there, their captors were watching, studying, waiting to see how humanity would react to its isolation. They would learn, as so many others had learned before, that the human spirit could not be contained. It could only be transformed. The Breakthrough Institute had transformed in the 6 months since the discovery of the predecessor archive. What had once been research laboratories were now filled with arrays of consciousness-linking devices, their design an impossible fusion of ancient alien wisdom and human innovation. Commander Chen stood in the central chamber, watching as technicians made final adjustments to the quantum resonance array. The device looked deceptively simple, a series of crystalline structures arranged in a spiral pattern, each pulsing with a soft blue light. The network is ready for its first full-scale test, Dr. Patil announced, her voice carrying both excitement and apprehension. We've successfully linked small groups, but this will be different. We're attempting to connect thousands of minds simultaneously. Chen nodded, knowing the risks. The early experiments had shown that human consciousness, when properly networked, could indeed create ripples in the containment barrier. But scaling up the process had proved challenging. The human mind wasn't meant to be connected to thousands of others. Status report on the other quarantine zones, Chen asked, turning to Lieutenant Park at his monitoring station. The signal patterns we detected from the Carina Nebula have changed, Park reported. They're stronger, more organized. I think they know we're trying something. And we're picking up similar signals from at least 3 other containment zones. They had spent months reaching out to other imprisoned civilizations, using the methods they'd learned from the archive to pierce the communication blackout. Some species had been trapped for centuries, others for mere decades. All of them had been watching humanity's progress with growing interest. Begin the sequence, Chen ordered, taking her position in the central linking chair. As the leader of this mission, she would serve as the focal point for the network. Establish connections one section at a time. The chamber hummed with energy as the first wave of participants, scientists, soldiers, and volunteers from around the world, were brought into the network. Chen felt their minds brush against hers, a sensation both alien and strangely familiar. First section stable, Patil reported, monitoring the readings. Moving to Section 2. More minds joined the network, each adding their consciousness to the growing web. Chen felt her awareness expanding, stretching beyond the confines of her own thoughts. She could sense the others not just as presences, but as partners in a vast, shared experience. All sections online, Patil announced. Network stability at 97%. Commander, it's working. Chen could feel it. The barrier that had seemed so impenetrable now appeared different through the lens of their combined consciousness. She could see its structure, the complex patterns of energy that held it together. And more importantly, she could see its flaws. Signal from Carina. Park's voice cut through her expanded awareness. They're attempting to synchronize with us. Through the network, Chen felt a new presence, alien yet kindred. The imprisoned species in the Carina Nebula had created their own consciousness network, reaching out across the void to join with humanity's effort. Accept the connection, Chen ordered, her voice echoing both physically and through the mental link. As the alien minds joined with theirs, the network's power grew exponentially. More signals came flooding in, the other quarantine zones, each adding their own mental energy to the growing web of consciousness. Species that had never met, separated by vast distances and imprisonment, were joining together in an unprecedented display of unity. The barrier, Patil gasped. Look at the barrier. Through both instruments and their enhanced perception, they could see the containment field beginning to fluctuate. Where it had once been solid and unchanging, now it rippled and swirled, its perfect geometry disrupted by the combined will of thousands of minds working in harmony. But their captors had not remained idle. Alarm signals blared as multiple probes appeared around Earth's orbit, their energy signatures more powerful than anything they'd encountered before. They're attempting to reinforce the barrier, Park warned. Energy levels are spiking. Chen felt the pressure through the network, the automated systems trying to suppress their effort, to force them back into their cage. But something else was happening too. Through their linked consciousness, she could feel the other imprisoned species sharing their knowledge, their experiences, their own discoveries about the nature of their containment. "Push harder," Chen commanded, her words carrying through the mental link to every connected mind. "We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for every species that's ever been locked away and forgotten." The chamber filled with light as the quantum resonance array reached full power. The network hummed with the combined mental energy of multiple civilizations, each contributing their unique perspective and strength to the effort. And then, like a soap bubble popping, something changed. The barrier didn't shatter or collapse. It simply ceased to be relevant. Their combined consciousness had achieved what the predecessors had theorized, a state of awareness that transcended physical constraints. "We're receiving something," Park announced, his voice filled with wonder. "Signals from outside the quarantine zones. Hundreds of them. Other species, free species, they can see us now. They know what's happening." Through the network, Chen could feel the ripples of their achievements spreading across the galaxy. The supposedly perfect system of containment that had imprisoned developing civilizations for millennia was failing, not through violence or technological superiority, but through the simple act of different species choosing to work together. "Send a message to all quarantine zones," Chen ordered, even as she felt their success through the mental link. "Tell them the cage doors are open. Tell them humanity remembers its promises. Tell them it's time to show the galaxy what imprisoned species can do when they work together." As the barrier's influence faded, Chen could feel the other species' celebrations through the network. But she could also feel something else, a growing awareness from the galaxy at large. Their captor's perfect system had failed, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions. Humanity had not just freed itself, it had changed the rules of the game entirely. And the galaxy would never be the same. 1 year after the breaking of the barriers, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Commander Sarah Chen stood aboard the bridge of the Earth vessel Unity, the first of a new class of ships built with technology shared freely among the formerly imprisoned species. Through the viewport, she could see the massive space station that had become the headquarters of what the galaxy now called the Liberation Alliance. Representatives from over 30 formerly quarantined species filled the station's grand assembly chamber, each bringing their own unique perspectives and technologies to the table. What their captors had intended as isolation had instead created the strongest coalition the galaxy had ever seen. "The archivists have arrived," Lieutenant Park announced from his station. The archivists, as they now called themselves, were the descendants of the original species that had imprisoned them all. They had requested this meeting, their first official contact with the Liberation Alliance. "Let them come," Chen replied, her voice steady. Through the remnants of the consciousness network that still linked many of the allied species, she could feel the mixture of anticipation and apprehension from the assembled representatives. The archivist delegation entered the chamber, tall, ethereal beings whose bodies seemed to shift between solid and energy states. Their leader, who called itself the primary observer, stepped forward. "We have come to understand our error," the primary observer began, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "For millennia, we sought to protect the galaxy from what we perceived as dangerous evolutionary paths. We believed isolation would prevent catastrophe. We were wrong." Chen stepped forward, representing not just humanity but all the species that had broken free. "You didn't prevent catastrophe," she said firmly. "You prevented progress. Every species you imprisoned found different solutions to the same problems you feared. We didn't need protection. We needed collaboration." The primary observer's form flickered in what might have been acknowledgement. "Your method of escape was unprecedented. Never in our observations had we considered that multiple species would join their consciousness voluntarily, creating something greater than the sum of its parts." That's because you were too focused on containing what you didn't understand, Dr. Patel added from her position among Earth's delegation. You never considered that consciousness itself could evolve beyond physical constraints. Through the network, Chen felt the approval of the other species. The Carina Coalition, with their crystalline thought matrices. The Veil Dwellers, who had been imprisoned for nearly 1,000 years. The Quantum Collective, whose digital consciousness had found harmony with organic minds. Each had contributed something unique to their shared liberation. We offer reparation, the primary observer stated. Access to our full archives, our technology, our knowledge. Keep it, Chen replied, surprising both the archivists and some of her allies. We've learned something far more valuable than any technology you could offer. We've learned how to innovate, adapt, and grow stronger through cooperation. The species you imprisoned, we've already surpassed you in ways you never imagined. To demonstrate her point, Chen opened her mind fully to the network, allowing everyone present to see the true scope of what the Liberation Alliance had achieved in just 1 year. Worlds rebuilt, technologies shared and improved, cultural exchanges that had enriched all participants. But most importantly, they saw the new methods of faster-than-light travel, communication, and exploration that had been developed through the combined efforts of formerly imprisoned minds.